Chapter 3, Part 2. So Ralph is concerned, this is Huts on the Beach. Ralph is concerned about building shelter, right? He wants safety. They need it if it rains. They need it so the little ones aren't scared at night all the time. So he thinks that the safety, the shelter is the priority. Jack is definitely turned more savage. He's the hunter. He's like becoming obsessed with it. All he wants to do is hunt, hunt, hunt. And now in this chapter, they're also starting to develop the character of Simon a little bit more. So far you kind of have Piggy developed, Jack, Ralph, and now Simon a little bit more in this chapter. Simon he's like a middle age. He's not quite as old as Jack and Ralph, but he's not a little one. The problem with Simon is in the last part, they called him a little cuckoo and batty. Simon is a nice kid. Like, he's the only one who sticks around to help Ralph. He reminds Ralph that he's the leader and he should take control. He's kind of like that quiet supporter, if you will. But they also say, like, when they're doing things and working, that Simon kind of goes off on his own a little bit, and they haven't quite figured that out, okay? So this is developing Simon a little bit more. Simon was not in the bathing pool as they had expected. When the other two had trotted down the beach to look back at the mountain, he had followed them for a few yards and then stopped. He had stood frowning down at a pile of sand on the beach where somebody had been trying to build a little house or hut. Then he turned his back on this and walked into the forest with an air of purpose. He was a small, skinny boy, his chin pointed, and his eyes so bright they deceived Ralph into thinking him delightfully gay and wicked. The coarse mop of black hair was long and swung down, almost concealing a low, broad forehead. He wore the remains of shorts, and his feet were bare like Jack's. Always darkish in color, Simon was burned by the sun to a deep tan that glistened with sweat. He picked his way up the scar, past the great rock where Ralph had climbed on the first morning, then turned off to his right among the trees. He walked with an accustomed tread through the acres of fruit and trees where the least energetic could find an easy, if unsatisfying, meal. Flower and fruit grew together on the same tree, and everywhere was the scent of ripeness and the booming of a million bees at pasture. Here, the little uns who had run after him caught up with him. They talked, cried out unintelligibly, lugged him toward the trees. Then, amid the roar of bees in the afternoon sunlight, Simon found for them the fruit they could not reach, pulled off the choicest from up in the foliage, passed them back down the endless outstretched hands. When he had satisfied them, he paused and looked. The little uns watched him inscrutably over double handfuls of ripe fruit. So he helps the little ones too. So, you know what I mean? They can't reach the fruit and stuff, and so he helps them get the food. Simon's a good guy. Simon turned away from them and went where the just perceptible path led him. Soon high jungle closed in. Tall trunks bore unexpected pale flowers all the way up to the dark canopy where life went on clamorously. The air here was dark too, and the creepers dropped their ropes like the rigging of foundered ships. His feet left prints in the soft soil, and the creepers shivered throughout their lengths when he bumped them. He came at last to a place where more sunshine fell. Since they had not so far to go, for the light creepers had woven a great mat that hung at the side of an open space in the jungle. For here, a patch of rock came close to the surface and would not allow more than little plants and ferns to grow. The whole space was walled with dark, aromatic bushes and was a bowl of heat and light. A great tree, fallen across one corner, leaned against the trees that stood still, and a rapid clamor flaunted red and yellow sprays right to the top. Simon paused. He looked over his shoulder as Jack had done at the close ways behind him, and glanced swiftly round to confirm that he was utterly alone. For a moment, his movements were almost furtive. Then he bent down and wormed his way into the center of the mat. The creepers and the bushes were so close that he left his sweat on them and pulled together behind him. When he was secure in the middle, he was in a little cabin, screened off from the open space by a few leaves. He squatted down, parted the leaves, and looked into the clearing. Nothing moving but a pair of gaudy butterflies that danced round each other in the hot air. Holding his breath, he cocked a critical ear at the sounds of the island. Evening was advancing toward the island. The sounds of the bright, fantastic birds, the bee sounds, even the crying of the gulls that were returning to their roots among the square rocks were fainter. The deep sea breaking miles away on the reef made an undertone less perceptible than the susurration of the blood. Simon dropped the screen of leaves back into place. The slope of the bars of honey-colored sunlight decreased. They slid up the bushes, passed over the green candle-like buds, moved up toward the canopy, and darkness thickened under the trees. With the fading of the light, the riotous colors died, and the heat and urgency cooled away. The candle buds stirred. Their green sepals drew back a little, and the white tips of the flowers rose delicately to meet the open air. Now the sunlight had lifted clear of the open space and withdrawn from the sky. Darkness poured out, submerging the waves between the trees till they were dim and strange as the bottom of the sea. The candlebuds opened their wide white flowers, glimmering under the light that pricked down from the first stars. Their scent spilled out into the air and took possession of the island. So what that last part is doing, guys, is telling you where Simon snuck off to. He found this beautiful place in the middle of the island, basically, where it wasn't so heat oppressive, and you didn't hear the clamoring of the shores, and you saw these beautiful butterflies and beautiful flowers, and the creepers kind of stopped there, and it was just this beautiful, serene, open, think of it maybe as a field that he found in the middle of this island. So this is what we'll call Simon's spot that he goes off to. This is where he's sneaking off to, you guys. This peaceful place where he can basically get away from all the chaos and be himself. So he's you're finding out he's not really that bizarre. He just figured out where to go have a peaceful, relaxing place to himself. And that's where he's creeping off to all the time. All right, guys, chapter 4 is called Painted Faces and Long Hair. We'll do this chapter next time. But even by the title, you can tell we're getting more savage here for sure. All right, and not to spoil it, but something happens in this chapter that's pretty, that sets the pace for a lot of the other stuff. Okay, guys,